Okay, perfect. So let's shoot this little video here, see how this goes. So I'll be doing this a little bit differently today. I'll be doing this off the cuff. Today's topic will be Sword Art Online, which just finished, and we'll take it from there, okay? So we'll see how this goes, guys. So today, the thing that I wanted to talk about, Sword Art just finished. I'm really sad because I thought there were 2 episodes left. Something told me that there were 24 episodes. Turns out there's only 23. What are you gonna do about it? I guess nothing, because, but the ending was really good, and there's a part at the end, and throughout this entire second half of Sword Art, that's really got me thinking, and I've always thought this about Sword Art, but the amazing thing about that show isn't that it's an MMORPG VR story. The good thing about it, the incredibly amazing thing about it, Sword Art Online is more of like a sci-fi epic. It touches on higher truths as opposed to just a story about technology or something. I think maybe Ridley Scott kind of does that a little bit. No, he's really good. I don't mean like that, but what I mean is in the way that Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica, the way that those stories don't really just say, oh, this is reality and that's it, and we're just going to take a look at it from there. But those stories instead say, there's a reason to reality. Now let's take a look at why and what it is that there is about reality. And I'll go into exactly why Sword Art is like that, but the main thing that got me is that final little scene at the end, and it's not a scene, but it's just a little goodbye. This is the final episode, but their adventures will continue. And I'll tell you right now, we'll go over it later in a second, but that one, it says, they'll come back, they'll have their adventures in the information wars. But anyway, after that it says, but as of this moment, every possibility is but a faint flicker wavering beyond a fluctuating light. And that just very heavily hints at, I guess, quantum physics, Schrodinger's cat and all, different possibilities. The reality you get is the reality that you observe, but let's get into it, okay? Let's start with the first talking point. Okay, there's a scene in Sword Art, the first story, where at the end, Kayaba talks about so much about how ever since he was a kid, he imagined a world, a castle in the sky. I hope I'm in the camera right. I can't really see because this is the rear, but that's the thing about that show is, in that show, Kirito doesn't win necessarily because he is the highest level fighter or because his weapons are the best. He won after Asuna sacrificed herself and his health points ran out, but he transcended the reality of that virtual reality. So that's the first time you see too that Kirito has yellow eyes that flash, and this is something you'll see later that's brought back in this new Alicization show. So anyway, we'll go into that, but the thing about Kayaba envisioning his castle, I think it really speaks to what Reki Kawahara perceives about reality, because I think the whole show is about what is reality. That's the main thing. Kayaba envisioned this world, this castle, and then he says, I'd like to think that it's still out there somewhere. And that really echoes in this new series when they talk about how if the world were destroyed and consumed by Subtilizer, it doesn't matter because the memories and the emotions of what they experienced his time with Yujiro, that will still exist. So Kaiba's envisioning the castle. I think it was really, he brought that castle to reality, not just by the actions. The actions were the result of the way he envisioned it. And anyway, I'll do my best here to clarify. But yeah, exactly. That's the next talking point is Yujiro and the love and memories that live forever. And this is from the scene, I think around episode 20 or 19 or whatever, where they're trying to bring Kirito back. Kirito lost his memories, and then Kirito lost his memories, or he didn't lose his memories, but he was completely unconscious. He was a vegetable, and they were trying to bring him back. And what was happening within his mind was he was reliving the memory of losing all the people that he's had in his life and all the pain that he went through. So he envisions Sachi getting murdered and all the midnight cats or whatever, the black cats or whatever they're called. And he remembers them. And it's funny because in that scene, he's in a classroom, almost like that's his reality without the memories that make up his ego. So Kirito is in a classroom and he's just going through the motions. He's almost like in a trance, like everybody in their day-to-day lives, because they haven't acted on the reality because they can't think outside of their trance. And he's walking, and then it's almost like he remembers who he is slowly. And he looks down an alley and he sees Sachi and the gang. That's what they're called. And he remembers, the strong emotional pain of that happening. And then he remembers to the Alpine story arc where, Asuna is captured, and, it's the kind of like sexual assault scene with that one dude who's going to marry her. And he remembers that. He remembers, I think, stabbing the guy with the sword in the head and everything. And then he remembers Yujiro, and he doesn't want to remember it. But it seems like, those memories and those experiences and the emotions that are part of it make up who his mind sees him as, makes up his consciousness. So, try to bring this one back. That's who he is, but not really. There's kind of like the idea that in Buddhism and other teachings, that you're not your body. So you can agree with that. Everybody can agree with the fact that you are not your body. You are not harm. And then they always take it a step further. And they say, you are not your mind. Right? I mean, yes, your consciousness, when you observe it, will show signals firing off in the brain. There's a frontal lobe, and your consciousness is acting, and you see things, and maybe the occipital lobe fires off, and maybe you put that person under stress, and the amygdala is firing off, the pituitary gland, and you're in fight or flight mode, and your body automatically reacts in the brainstem and the medulla or whatever. But you are not your mind either, is the idea in Buddhism. So the idea is that, and Hinduism and a lot of Eastern studies, but the idea is that you have a body and you have a mind, but you are not either. You are what's observing it in the back. And that's why it's so hard to put into words when you kind of feel like there's more of a reality, like you're asleep, like Kirito in the classroom. It's hard to put into words because it's more of a feeling. It's not a conscious awareness. And I don't want to dive too far in, so let's just say you have a body, you have a mind, and all these things that make it up, you know, the memories that Kirito had, that's an image of himself that he has, that he uses to interact with the world around him. And eventually he was so upset by the pain that he shut down and he was a vegetable. And because of, you know, the disconnection. But to bring him back, he had to want to come back. And it's kind of like how some people overcome ridiculous odds to survive in surgery and everything. But anyway, you know, the thing that brought him back was his memory of, you know, Asuna and I forgot what his sister's name is. I know it's Lee from the game. So her and Sinon and Klein, who I think they seriously just do not give him enough screen time. The guy really cared about Kirito back in the day, and especially Ishil. They really do all the guys dirty in this show. But, you know, what brought him back was, you know, it wasn't the pain, it was like a good reason why, and it was other people. Anyway, let's move on to the next point. I just wanted to leave that with you, the whole how he restored his consciousness. I guess we'll go into the next thing was, and yeah, you know, it's kind of tough because when they're restoring that consciousness on the outside, even the characters are touching upon philosophical terms of what the mind is. So I know Reki Kawahara has to be trying to really leave these subtle little ideas about it, or not consciously, but these are ideas that inform his work. Because when they're talking about bringing his memory back, they're talking about how they can reconstruct that ego, basically. They say, and I'm going to butcher this one because I've not studied it well enough, but this would be some new thought stuff too, if you want to look into it. But there's the subjective reality and there's the objective reality. So there's the objective reality, which is the reality that we observe, and because it's objective. Objective just means that black and white. It is what it is. Objective. It's an object that you hold in your hands. It's definite, but subjective. The subjective reality, the subjective mind, is the thought that is possible. It hasn't existed in an objective reality. Okay, so that's what the difference is. And they're talking, the two scientists, Ringo and the spiky-haired cuck guy, he frickin' talks about how these are abstract ideas and everything, but they can try to reconstruct it from other people's objective perspective of Kirito. So when it came down to it, ultimately his ego was a construction of certain ideas about who he was that's built on memories too. And that's something we saw back in Sword Art Online's movie, Ordinal Scale, where they tried to use the memories of everybody within Aincrad to reconstruct the consciousness of his daughter, the scientist's daughter. Anyway, it's very clear that Reki Kawahara is touching upon these things. And I guess the next thing we can talk about is, and you know what, to totally bring that in again, Subtilizer, okay, the main bad guy from the US military, you know, the real creepy guy. That guy is obsessed with stealing souls. It isn't. I'm getting kind of winded. You know, his whole thing is stealing souls. So, anyway, that just goes back to how much this isn't a story just about science and RPGs. You know, this is a story about what is reality. That uses VR to kind of discuss that. I mean, you look at the entire world of Alicization. The way it starts is these kids, they're in their little village, Yushio and Keito are chopping wood and everything, and then they do their little system call with the little S, and then they look at the durability of the tree and they see the health points and they're like, wow, you seriously didn't even make a dent. And that's them completely nonchalantly accepting the reality of the physics in that world, whereas we'd be like, whoa, what's going on? Like, why is there like a giant computerized S in front of us, and why are we able to see the health points? You know, like, why are we able to see durability stats and everything? So, and that's amazing. That's the other amazing part about Reki Kawahara is, you know, he put into his story something that's very implicit. You know, it wasn't done through exposition, although I know that some people complained about exposition in the first episode, but it wasn't exposition. It was something that we gleaned from the way they acted. You know, they weren't like, oh, what's going on? You know, but the physics of that reality and the physics of our world differ, but the same kind of questions about, you know, what happens beyond life and what is right, you know, those things carry over. There's a scene in the beginning, the first half of Alicization, where they're sitting under a tree and Yujio and Kirito are training their two little apprentice girls. One of them becomes Yujio's little girlfriend later and fiance. And they're sitting there talking about how there's the law of the, you know, the knights or whatever, the law that got Alice banned or taken to the capital. And they're talking about that law, and they're talking about how, yes, there's a law, but then there's a higher law that, you know, just because something is law doesn't mean it's necessarily right. It has to do with, you know, is it legal or is it ethical? But it even goes further into that and says, well, look, there's an implicit right or wrong in every situation. And it kind of touches on why there is. You know, and it reminds me of, I forgot which, one of the founding fathers. It's not Thomas Paine, but it's one of those. It's one of the guys, and you know, one of the governors says, "Look, man, okay, you can't be declaring independence and everything. Obviously, you're a colony, and we take care of you, and we're a giant superpower. We're gonna kill you." And he's like, "Well, look, I don't really care. You know, I've made my peace with the King of Kings and everything, as opposed to your whack-ass king who totally violates our rights and everything. So I stand up for what's right." Okay, and you know, it's kind of the same idea. You know, I'm sure without that lengthy tirade, you could understand. And it just goes back to how Sword Art Alicization is about what is reality. So I'm taking a lot of time on this one, and I think this is one of the greatest things about anime is that it's not a, you know, in Western media, a lot of it is very much like, hey, look, this is the objective reality. Let's be cynical as hell, and let's just kind of get through life, accumulate power, so that you can live relaxed and whatever. Whereas in anime, there's kind of this, what is right? What kind of values do we value? Because ultimately those values will get us the results that we want. And it becomes a story about, not tragedies about human nature, but epics about the potential of human nature. You know, that's exactly what it does. You know, you look at Spirited Away, for instance, and it talks about that kind of lingering feeling that you might get when you're alone, where you kind of feel a sense of smallness, and you understand that there's more to reality than you. You really feel small. It's kind of like, I think it was, I forgot where, I remember I was watching Violet Evergarden, and there's that scene where they're overlooking the entire city over the bell tower with that girl whose brother is a drunk, and it fills them with awe. And I remember Googling, you know, this feeling of awe, because I was reading a book about this blind mountain climber, and I was thinking about what is awe, and awe was a sense of smallness that is evoked by something when by just receiving so much data at a time that the brain is overwhelmed. Oh my god, and that's another point too, is in I think season 2 of SAO, they're talking about how reality is the same as the virtual reality. The only difference is how much data exists. And this is happening when Kirito's trying to design Yui's little computer monitor, that thing that projects her or whatever. And he talks about how reality just has more data, and then you go into SAO Alicization, and they're talking about how real this feels compared to the full dive, because literally it's about their fluct lights or their souls completely existing in a different reality. It just blows my mind. And I'll go into exactly what to make of this too, but I kind of forgot about all this, but then there's this scene where Kirito is fighting with Subtilizer, and Subtilizer is literally like he takes on the form of just a monster, like a dark shadow demon monster. It's like he became that person in that reality, based on just the kind of thoughts he was thinking and who he was and how he saw himself. And it stands in stark contrast with how Kirito sees himself as he's Kirito the Black Swordsman. And what does that mean? That it's like a self-image that he's constructed based on his memories and all the things he values. And Kirito the Black Swordsman was a person who would save the people. So they stand in stark contrast. And then when he's getting overwhelmed, everyone can feel almost like a telepathic recognition of Kirito trying to fight, and he's getting overwhelmed, but then there's, in the last moment when all hope is lost, Yushio helps him. Yushio blocks the sword, and it's like the scene. I just keep jumping here, so I'm sorry. I will get better at organizing my thoughts. But it's like the scene in Harry Potter where Goblet of Fire. He's in the graveyard, and at this kind of, in both stories, at the most darkest moment, something not extrasensory, but something beyond the physical reality intervenes to help them, and it's literally the spirit of people who have passed. And look, I'm not trying to make a religious statement. I would rather say that this is esoteric speculation. But it made me think about what is the essence of the spirit and what implications it has on reality. Because I think the presumption for many people is that kind of like we're just observing. Like people aren't people. People are just machines that just happen to observe things, and we just work as automatons. But it's just, why the point in observing? Why the point in strong emotional charges? It never was a convincing thing for me, but this is a hard thing to describe explicitly, like I was saying, because consciously, you're looking for the language to describe it, but these are things that are felt, so it's deeper, it's more in the subconscious, limbic brain, medulla and everything, it's a feeling. If you were to look at New Thought / Law of Attraction thinkers, they would say, well, it's a vibration. And, and I think there's merit to that. I don't want to stay on that too much, because I think there are a lot of loonies who kind of just read like one article on Medium and say, oh, law of attraction, you just think it and it happens. But I think there's truth to it if you look really deeply into what they're trying to say. Because if you look at Einstein, and this is the thing that I always go back to, is that, arts, sciences, they're all part of religion, they're all part of the same branch of knowledge that looks to ennoble the spirit to a higher plane, or something like that, to that effect. And Einstein's the one who completely revolutionized physics by saying that everything is relative, not absolute. And I really don't want to get into that one. Everything is relative to your perspective, and your perspective is built on memories, experiences. It's all relative, though. But more importantly, Einstein developed E equals mc squared, which is just saying, all energy, all matter is energy. It's just expressed in a certain way. I'm telling you guys, Sword Art Online is science epic. It's not a space epic like Star Wars, but it's sci-fi epic. It uses science as a vehicle for purely cynical people to address higher philosophical, theological, esoteric questions. And I will just say that on the physical reality thing, where they just implicitly accept the system call of it all, just because they didn't observe a creator that created the underworld doesn't mean that there wasn't a creator. So, and I will say it this way, I'll say the unobservable does not mean the non-existent. So the unobservable does not mean the non-existent. It's like Schrodinger's cat. So let's go into quantum physics. Schrodinger's cat says that, hey, and I think that was a conversation with Einstein too, right? So it says, hey dude, look, there's a cat here. Let's say I kill it with, I think it was gas or whatever, right? But I put it in a box first, and you can't see what's going on. I can't hear what's going on. I can't touch, smell, taste what's going on, feel it. I can't observe it with my 5 senses. Because I cannot observe what is happening in that box, that cat is not dead. It is not. It's not. It could not be. It is not dead. It is not alive either. It is not even existent. And what it is it is all the possibilities that are possible for that cat. That cat could be dead. That cat could be alive. That cat could have mutated into a dragon. And then this goes to Heisenberg's whole, if we look at light acts as a wave and a particle. So if depending on how you observe it, it acts that way. It acts as light, as a wave. But if you observe it as a particle, it acts as a particle. And that goes to Kayaba's envisioning the castle. He had to observe it for it to exist in the objective reality. And even if you go back to frickin' Nikola Tesla, who talks about how he envisions his inventions. Nikola Tesla might have had more brain power than frickin' Edison, but he was just not such a good businessman. Couldn't bring his value to the market. Anyway, this guy talks about I think he uses Hinduist terminology. He talks about prana, meaning the life force that fills all reality. Old school physics in the Gilded Age would have called it something like the ether, right? Because everybody thought radio waves traveled through an ether, an invisible ether, and it's similar, but they refuted that kind of way of saying it. But anyway, it's the envisioning brought it to fruition. Let me check this recording here. Oh, thank God. I had to make sure it was still recording because apparently Androids just stopped recording if you have an HD, because otherwise your phone will overheat, which, whatever. I don't know why I can't choose to let it overheat. Anyway, it's incredible, and I glossed over the yellow eyes thing. I don't think I'd seen Kirito's eyes turn yellow since the Aincrad era, where he lost all his HP, but because of the drive and the emotional intensity of the situation, he transcended the reality of that moment, and then he stabbed Kaiba and ended the game. It just wasn't about, most of the story was about overcoming the reality of that virtual reality. But then at a certain point, the story was about overcoming the limits of that reality as just a limit of your own mind. I'm going to say that again so I can understand it. So, it wasn't about overcoming the limits of that virtual reality. Or it wasn't about overcoming that virtual reality based on its own rules. But it was about transcending the limits of that virtual reality that had been accepted by your mind. Kirito's eyes turn yellow when he comes back from... Oh my God, there's just so much to Sword Art that it just baffles me how people can just ridicule it and act like it just doesn't touch on such great themes. Like, I understand how fun happened, but look, there's another point too. There's the story of how in that reality the sword the power levels weren't just based on leveling up, how good they were at things, but it was based on what was behind their sword, the energy behind their sword. And at first I was like, oh my God, this is stupid. Like, I thought it was so stupid. Because, because the guy he was fighting was that elitist, eventual rapist guy that he's like, look, I'm going to win because my family, my lineage is full of all these really powerful swordsmen. And that validated his victory to him. And then Kirito's teacher just kept losing because she couldn't get over that mental block. It was a mental block. It was accepting of a reality. And Kirito's eyes turned yellow later. At that point, he just became an ultimate freaking, and I know people will complain, an overpowered character. He was basically a god. He could fly all of a sudden, whereas everybody else had to use dragons. But this guy just transcended reality again. That's what happened. He was in that reality, but he still transcended that reality this time. It wasn't even like he was an outside actor acting on this reality. He was inside it, acting outside of its limits in a way, because he realized that he wasn't in it. He wasn't. All right, going too far into the esoteric. I'll go ahead and bring it home. Excuse me. So the thing that started this video is at the end of that show, the end of Alicization, I was like, first off, what the hell? I thought there were 2 more episodes. But the other thing was, it ends with every possibility is but a faint flicker, wavering beyond a fluctuating light. Even the language, fluctuating light. As if all life is energy. Every possibility, like Schrodinger's cat, every possibility is but a faint flicker, like the flicker of a candle, wavering beyond a fluctuating light. I swear, this guy's putting riddles in here like it's the frickin' Bible. Every possibility is but a faint flicker, wavering beyond a fluctuating light. It's almost as if, it's like with Buddha saying, describing how reality is as we see it in a way. He says, everything we are is a result of everything we've thought. And he makes metaphors to how it's like looking at light. It's like looking at light with tinted glasses. The reality isn't tinted, but the reality isn't tinted red or whatever it is. But because of how we've chosen to see it, it is. Because we've chosen by habitually seeing it until it has been the norm. Because we've observed it over and over and over and over. And then the language, beyond a fluctuating light. A faint flicker. And I take that to mean like a flame, like a candle. And the reason I do, and it's like, it goes back to that scene where Kitty goes to the classroom and he's awakened to his reality is, it's all a faint flicker. He could have not gone back if he really wanted to not go back, because the emotional charge of not wanting to face reality because of fear was strong. That's an emotionally charged memory. It's like it's traumatic. But then there's the emotionally charged memory of all the people that he loves, that he would, and on one end, in fear, he would empower a reality where he gave up. And then on the other hand, he could empower a reality where things would work out, where he would help others. sci-fi masterpiece. I think it's incredible. I think it really goes from philosophy to the esoteric without making just such a bad case. The message it tries to say is it's almost like you can build your castle in the sky. You can if you have a strong enough reason why. And if you're very clear on exactly what that vision is. Because ultimately, reality is what you think of it. It's either a gift, if you have the faith to believe it is, or it is a curse, if that's how you see it. Great story. If somehow you watched all the way to the end, congratulations. Please let me know in the comments. Give me a book report on a 5-page book report on everything that I covered. Make sure you read a few books on Schrodinger's cat and quantum physics, and let me know about it because I haven't read any books on it, and I would like to know more. If you think I'm right, please let me know. Please share this out to everyone. Let them know that they're wrong. You know, because people are cynical, and that's total bullshit. Especially if you live in America and live a relatively normal life. You know, I get it because everyone does have trauma. And, the pull to be cynical is very strong because I'd say 99% of the world is very much like, well, this is how it is. You know, but then there's a 1%. Who brought the world, 3 million years ago. That was the first art, cave paintings, 3 million years ago. You know how flawed that is? That's 3 million years. Hold on, let's put that into perspective. 12,000 years ago, we had the cultivation of grain, domestication of animals. That's 12,000 years ago. That's 1, 2, 0, 0, 0. That's 1 comma. 3 million is 2 commas, so that's 6 zeros compared to 4. 3 million, 3M versus 12K years. The cynical people who are just not awake, I guess. They're not woke. It's very hard to be. And they follow the cue of everyone around them because they don't have faith in themselves and their visions. So make sure you share. Oh, and if you agree that Sword Art Online is a sci-fi masterpiece, make sure you share. Make sure you like it. Make sure you comment. And most importantly, make sure you really think about what kind of life you want to envision. I'm working on it right now. I literally write in a book exactly what I'm trying to envision. I'm trying to build that castle in the sky